Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to this week's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing. And man, I really appreciate you guys coming by, checking out the video today. Got one that I think you're going to be really happy with by the end of the seminar here. We're going to be talking about everything you need to know about walking topwaters, guys. I've got them all different sizes, colors, all this type of stuff. It's one of my favorite lures to fish. They've been around forever. And there's a lot more to them as far as maximizing the efficiency and maximizing the fish catching potential. This is a bait category that's a little bit more complicated than other topwaters. So we're going to give you guys probably the most detailed tutorial that you've ever seen on YouTube on the walking topwaters. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to go through all my favorites here. We're going to talk about the profiles of them, when certain profiles work better in other situations, the colors, when certain colors work better, how to work them, all that type of stuff. I'm going to show you guys the equipment to use for it. And then finally, at the end of the video, we're going to talk about the areas and seasonal patterns and where you want to fish this particular genre of topwater lures at. So it's going to be an info-packed seminar here. Also, guys, real quick, the dreaded housekeeping tip of our weekly seminar here. If you guys want to support the channel here, most people on Advanced Bass Fishing are hardcore channel hardcore channel followers. The best way you guys can do it, guys, is in my link. I'll link all the topwaters we're talking today in my tackle warehouse links in the description. If you guys want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is if you need any fishing tackle for the spring, just go into my description on this video and use my tackle warehouse link, and the channel gets a small percentage of the commission. Like if you buy, a topwater lure, the channel gets a small percentage of that sales. So that's a really good way to give back if you want to do that here on the channel. So much appreciated. Okay, guys, here is the original thing that started is the old school Zar Spook, guys. This is one of my Zar Spooks right here that I've had forever. In fact, I qualified for the top 10 down at the Bassmaster Megabucks at Lake Murray on this exact Zar Spook many years ago, and caught an 8.5 pounder on it the last day of the tournament. So the Zar Spook is the granddaddy of them all. And it's been around, you guys may correct me, but I think the Zar Spook's been around since the 40s or 50s out there. And I like to give a little bit of backstory on all this as far as history goes. The Zar Spook really it became famous here in the Missouri Ozarks, like a lot of different lure categories, the jerk baits, square bill crankbaits. The Zar Spook really got popular here, like at Table Rock Lake and Bull Shoals, by an angler named Charlie Campbell. Charlie Campbell lives just south of here. He lived just south of here from Springfield, Missouri for years. He passed away a few years ago. But Charlie won the 1974 Bassmaster Federation tournament at Table Rock Lake on a Zar Spook. And after that, it sort of took off and became a mainstay of bass anglers everywhere, tournament anglers. And it's still as effective today, guys. The walking topwater is just as good today as it was back then. And we've had a lot of improvements. You've got the old school Zar Spook, and then you've got the new technology like the Megabass Diamantes. So we're going to get into all the different ones out there and how to fish them. So first of all, what I want to do is I've got my selection laid out here, and I want to go through this selection here, and I want to talk a little bit about each of my favorite walking topwaters and the situations that I use them in. So that's going to be the sort of the meat and potatoes of this, getting into it. So anyway, guys, there's a couple different brands that I use here, and then I'm going to talk about each one of them. I love the Zar Spook, guys. I love both the original Zar Spook and the Super Spook here. These are really good topwaters. Then the other ones I use are the Megabass Diamante and the Megabass Giant Dog X series, and some of their bigger ones like the Mega Dog here. So we're going to talk about each one of those. So first of all, let's talk about the Zar Spook a little bit. To be honest with you, I used the regular Zar Spook for many, many years until the Super Spook came out, the larger version here. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, you guys know that I'm with Megabass. I'm sponsored by Megabass, but my favorite walking topwater is the Super Spook, the Head and Super Spook. This thing to me is by far the best walking topwater out there under the right conditions. Now, every one of these walking topwaters have specific conditions, but as far as day in and day out and having a wide range of conditions that it works in, this Super Spook has just produced so many good fish for me. Now, the only difference is between like the Super Spook and the regular Spook is just about the size on it. That's really the only difference as far as the internal mechanisms, the components, all that type of stuff, the action that the bait has. They're very similar. It's just a larger profile. And what happens is the larger profile on the Super Spook, it tends to make a larger swath side to side. So it creates more disturbance. Now, one of the reasons that I think the Super Spook is so effective is I think it is just the right size to attract both numbers of fish and big fish. Some of these that we're going to talk about here are more conducive to catching numbers of fish, and they don't really produce the quality fish. And some of the bigger ones we'll talk about are not about quantity at all. It's all about getting a big bite. But as far as just day in and day out, something that'll catch you a 1.5 pound fish and something that'll catch you an 8-pounder, the Head and Super Spook is by far probably my favorite model out there. Now, I do use that, and we'll talk a little bit about the conditions. The conditions for this thing is wide ranging. One of the things that I do like about the Super Spook a little bit better than some of the others is since it is a larger profile, it works a little bit better if you have some chop on the water. Because not that it won't work in calm water, it will. Walking topwaters are great baits for calm water. But when you have a chop out there, one of the reasons that the Super Spook works a little better is it simply creates more surface disturbance. It's a larger bait, it puts out more motion. Fish can probably track it a lot better than they can just the regular size spook there. So that's when I like that. Now the next one that I use, guys, is the Megabass Diamante Topwater. This is a modern version Megabass, high components. It's got the rattles in it like that. It's very realistic. It comes in a lot of different color patterns. And it's basically the same thing as a spook. It's a walking topwater that goes side to side like that. Now the difference in the Diamante versus the Zar Spook here is the swath that it creates, because when you're working the Diamante through the water, it doesn't have near as a wide side to side. It has a little bit tighter action like that. Now, there's times where you want this, because let's say, for example, the Super Spook goes like this through the water, creates a lot of sloshing, spits up water everywhere. The Diamante is more like this, and it doesn't create quite as much motion. So the times that I like the Diamante, since it's more of a subtle side-to-side action, is on those conditions where the fish are a little bit more finicky. It can be those days where you don't have any wind out there. It can be really clear water. It can be a brighter sky condition where the fish, are a little bit more finicky. Just basically when the fish aren't near as aggressive and you've got a little bit tougher fishing conditions, and you do have a little bit calmer fishing conditions. That's when you're going to find out this works a little better. And also the Diamante, it'll work a little bit better in the warmer water, because the Diamante, since it does have a tight side-to-side action like that, you can work it faster, easier. So it comes through the water quicker, faster. And in warmer water conditions, sometimes, that can be more conducive. Now the Spook, since it has a wide action, you can work it as fast or slow as you want. You can work it like that, and you can let it stop, and you can go super, super slow back and forth if the water's cooler. And that's why a Super Spook or a spook like that is really good in the marginal water temperatures. Now, when I say marginal water temperatures, I'm talking about like the lowest temperatures that you can consistently catch fish on a walking topwater, which in my opinion is sort of that mid to upper 50s. I don't fish a walking topwater hardly ever, if the water temperature is under 55 degrees. And most of the time I like it to be upper 50s or around 60 for that to work good. Okay, the next ones that I use, guys, this is a little bit smaller version. This is the Megabass Giant Dog X. Now you can see the difference here between the Super Spook and the Giant Dog X. It's a different profile. It's not quite as round. It's probably 25% smaller, and this is more of a finesse type of a walking topwater. The Giant Dog X, guys, I'll tell you a little bit of backstory. The best day of fishing I ever had in my life, as far as just getting bit and catching fish, it was the first year Bassmaster went to Lake Champlain up there. And Champlain hadn't gotten any tournament pressure at that point. The first day of practice, we had a day out there where it was completely calm. It was a light, misty rain. no wind whatsoever out there. And I got out on this flat with this Giant Dog X. This thing's been around for a long time. Guys, I caught over 100 bass in one day of practice, and I probably had 20 of them over 4 pounds. And I was not fishing like I would in a tournament. What I would do is I'd catch one, and then I'd kick the trolling motor on high, and I'd go 50 yards before I'd even make another cast on this bass flat. And then I'd make another cast, I'd catch one, and then I'd go another 50 yards without making a cast. If I would have casted the whole time, it would have been like a 200-300 fish day. It was unbelievable. Every one of them on the Giant Dog X. Now this is when it works best, guys. The Giant Dog X is all about super calm water and a little bit more finesse presentation. The drawback of a Giant Dog X is if you have any chop at all in the water, it'll nosedive through that chop. But if you've got a calm condition out there, this will generate a strike in calm conditions even better than the Diamante, especially if you have smallmouth or spotted bass, something, you know, because they prefer usually a little bit smaller topwater. But again, tougher fishing conditions, clear water, super clear water. I like this smaller Giant Dog X. And like I said, I'll have all the links to every one of these lures in the description of the video. And finally, on the finesse end of it, guys, is the Dog X Junior. Now this, here again, let's take a comparison. Here's the Super Spook next to the Dog X Junior. A lot smaller, it's even smaller than the regular Dog X. Now this is a true finesse bait, guys. This is when, again, you gotta have calm conditions, you gotta have, you know, specifically it works really good on smallmouth and spotted bass, just like the Giant Dog X does. But it's just another finessier presentation when those fish are feeding on a little bit smaller bait. And that's the whole key, guys, is knowing the size and the profile of the topwater to throw based upon the time of the year, which we'll talk about here a little bit later. That the Megabass Megabass Dog X Junior, I've caught a ton of fish on it. I usually fish this on a spinning rod too. This is the only one that I do. And the last two, guys, are the Mongos. You got the Mega Dog. This is the Megabass Mega Dog, which is a giant topwater. It's about 12 inches long. And then you have the Mega Dog X. These are both big topwaters here. In comparison, here's the Super Spook, which is a large topwater. Here's the Mega Dog X, and here is the Mega Dog next to it here. Now, these two topwaters, guys, the big ones here, are for real specific situations. The situations that you have to have for this to work. Number one, you're not gonna get a lot of bites on it, but when you get bit on this thing, it's going to be a good fish. Most all the time, it's gonna be over a 3-pound fish. In order to get the fish to bite this thing, again, you have to have the exact right set of circumstances. It's got to be low light levels. You got to have just a little bit of breeze on the water, not like a big chop, but you just need some type of chop to break up the surface. You've got to have a above average temperature day along with those low light conditions, and you've got to have water visibility, say between 3 to 5 foot. If you have those conditions, especially if they're matched up with like a south wind or a southwest wind and a falling barometric pressure, and you've got a lake that has quality fish in it, guys, you can't beat a big giant topwater like those Mega Dog series. So they're a little bit different. We'll get into as far as how to fish them here in a little bit. So that's the basic ones that I use here. So I'm gonna take a quick break, guys, and we'll be back, and we're gonna go over colors a little bit, the best colors. So we'll be right back. Okay, guys, we're back. We're gonna get into colors now, sort of give you guys some tips and advice on that. And also we're gonna get into some things like split rings and hooks and how to actually set these up to get the most action out of them with that. Now, one of the things that you're gonna find out about topwater lures, it's very similar to jerk baits in terms of the color patterns that work under different situations. And I'm sort of gonna give you guys my favorite ones and talk a little bit about it. But first of all, before I get into my specific favorite colors, let's talk a little bit about the overall color scheme of it. Just like jerk baits, guys, you're gonna have 3 primary colors. You're gonna have some type of a translucent like this that has some type of a see-through finish on it, like a clear see-through. Then you're gonna have the painted or the matte flat finishes here. That's another color pattern. And then you're gonna have ones that have some type of a metallic finish on it. Those are gonna be the 3 color patterns that we use mainly with that. Now, the color patterns for that, I said just a little refresher if you missed the jerkbait one. In general, the clear patterns, like the see-through, translucent type colors, are going to be better on your days that either have extremely clear water where you're fishing, or your light intensity is a little bit lighter or a little bit brighter. So say, for example, if you got a sunny or partly cloudy day and you got some clear water, this clear translucent sides are going to produce a lot more fish, because a little bit less obvious in the water, you know, and when those fish are wary and are finicky under those conditions, a lot of times they're more hesitant on brighter colors. So this is a color I use in the, like I said, lighter wind, brighter conditions, all that type of stuff. The matte finish, or the solid finish out there, is my low light, cloudy weather condition. If you have a day out there where it's like rainy, heavy overcast, all that type of stuff, maybe the water clarity is a little bit more off colored than what people fish, you know, traditional topwater fishing in. Let's say if that water temperature, if that water clarity is down there, you know, more in that 2.5 foot range, you're going to do a lot better on a solid pattern that's a little bit brighter like that. But the main thing with this, guys, is this is my rainy, cloudy weather pattern, is the solid finish. And this is the exact one I was telling you about, all those fish I caught at Lake Champlain. This is the exact one I caught it on, guys, a fire tiger or a matte tiger here in the megabass color pattern. The chartreuse, guys, any type of yellow or chartreuse is a really good topwater color on those low light, a little bit more off colored water situations, with the exception is if you're fishing for smallmouth. If you're fishing for smallmouth, like where I was at Champlain, the bright colors can be really, really good on smallmouth because they just have a completely different personality than the largemouth. And finally, the metallic version, guys, any type of, oh man, got a hook in me there. Any type of metallic side, like the chrome or metallic like this, this is a really good color if you have a lake that has a lot of blueback herring. All you guys that fish like Lake Murray or Lake Hartwell, places that have blueback herring, you're gonna find that the chrome is one of the top, you know, patterns out there with that. Also, chrome works pretty good in those days where it's a little bit brighter sunlight conditions and you do have some wind out there. So let's say, for example, if I'm fishing and it's, you know, say partly cloudy where you got 50% overcast and you got like maybe a 10 or 15 mile an hour wind where it's a little bit choppy out there, sometimes the flash off of a chrome side can generate those strikes in a little bit rougher water conditions, so that this thing's coming along the top like that and the sun's shining on it, the water's clear, it's a little bit rougher. Sometimes that sun reflecting off the metallic sides just triggers the fish a little bit better. So those are the three main color patterns for it. Now, my favorite colors, as far as when you're just talking about a color pattern, guys, I'll just show you some of mine. One of my favorite is on this Zar Spook is this bullfrog pattern. Guys, I've caught a ton of fish on the bullfrog. Bullfrog pattern works really good if the water is a little bit more off colored. It's one of my favorite colors for that. This is the matte shad on the Diamante, guys. This is absolutely my favorite color, like in clear water situations. Bright skies, clear water, super, super clear water, not much wind. I really like the matte shad pattern. This, any type of the, you know, the pearl or the bone or something like this, and the Diamante too is gonna be good in the really, really cloudy conditions, low light. And then also, guys, I do like a baby bass at times. A baby bass is one color they don't see very much, but shad, you can't beat shad, any type of a shad pattern. So I don't think that, you know, color does play an impact on the topwaters, but one of the things that you got to realize about a topwater color is like, I think a lot of it maybe it's more important to the angler, even though there is some impact on it, because the topwater, the only thing they really see is the bottom of it and maybe a little bit of the sides. But one of the things I can tell you guys about the topwaters is there's, if I can find one here, there's two colors that I do know that they do react to completely different than anything else. And one is, if I can get this out of here, is a black topwater. God dang it. Guys, a black topwater, there's at times when they don't want anything else besides a black topwater. It can be really, really good. And I like a black topwater early in the morning. It's like right off the bat when you've got low light levels and you've got a lot of shade on the water. There's something about a black topwater will get a lot of bites with it. That's one thing that I have seen a lot as far as the difference on them. And the same with the bone colored. It's like the bone and the black. There are times when they definitely prefer these two colors over anything else, even more than like the shad patterns. A lot of the shad patterns you have out there, they're real specific as far as specific conditions out there that they work or don't work. But as far as just the bass being able to see something and react to it, obviously more than anything else, it's black and white basically. Those are the two things that I've really seen them react to differently on there. Okay, now next let's talk a little bit about hooks and split rings. One of the things about it, guys, is you always want to use a split ring on your topwaters there. Don't ever, you know, just hook them on, you know, to the eye ring like that. You always want to use a split ring, just like that on it, small split ring. Split ring will give it more freedom of motion side to side like that. Some people use a loop knot. I don't like using a loop knot. I get, you know, a little bitty split ring works, you know, just as good to me. That's very critical with that. And also another thing, guys, is when you're putting hooks on your topwaters, like replacement hooks, do not go too big. We've talked about this a lot in other videos with different lures out there. And it's even more important on a walking topwater than anything else, because if you go too big on a walking topwater, it is going to hurt your action. It's going to make your bait set down further in the water. It's going to make it nosedive if you have a little chop. It's going to decrease the side-to-side action on it if that's what you're after. So go with a smaller hook, and I do prefer that Gamakatsu, the Gamakatsu G Finesse Nano Coat hook, because it is a super, super light hook. It's got a really good penetration on it. And the hooks that come with, this is the stock hooks that come with the Megabass Diamante. They are really good. They're super, super sharp and super, super light. But the main thing, guys, is don't replace your hooks with something that are hooks that are too big or have too big of a bite diameter on it and too big of a hook diameter. If you put too big of a hook on your topwaters out there, you're gonna have a harder time hooking up with those fish, simply because, you know, you got to have more power to penetrate them, and it's definitely going to hurt your action with that a little bit. So that's the main thing with that, guys. The colors, the hooks, the split rings there, favorite topwaters here. We're going to get back here in a second, and I'm going to show you the equipment that I fish my topwaters on, and then I'm going to show you the retrieve and cadence to use on different type of walking topwaters. So we'll be right back with that. Okay, guys, let's get into the rods that I use for this stuff and the line a little bit and how to work it as far as the cadence on there. Because one of the things you're going to find out about a walking topwater, and what I talked about at the start of the video, it being a little bit more difficult of a technique, is that this is one lure, like a jerk bait, where you're totally responsible for putting the action on the bait. This is not a lure like some of them that you can just throw out there and reel in. You have to put a specific type of action on it based upon what you're trying to create with that. And in order to do that, you really need the right rod setup as far as the action and the length on it in order to get that right action. Now, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the line. Most all the time I'm using mono with this. You can't use fluorocarbon. You guys that are watching this channel probably knows, because fluorocarbon, it sinks in the water, and if you try to use fluorocarbon on a walking topwater, it's going to sink your nose down, and it's going to nose dive in the water. So most of the time with like the Diamante or Spook, I'm using anywhere between, say, 14 to 20 pound test monofilament line. Monofilament floats, it's my favorite, by far my preferred line with it. Now, if I am using the really big ones like this, like the Mega Dog X or the Mega Dog, that is when I will use braided line, because these are so heavy that when you cast them out there, the line stretch and the fact that it takes so much force and so much movement to get these things walking, is by using braided line, you don't have that stretch, and you can cause these big giant topwaters to react a lot better with braided line. Now, a lot of people I know, they even use braided line on something like a Super Spook. I'm not a fan of that, guys. I don't like using braided line unless I have to with those super heavy ones. Number one, I don't like the fact that you can see this braid floating on the surface. I think that if you're working your topwater slow, or you stop your topwater, they can see that black braid floating on the surface. The other with that is I think you can pull the bait away from the fish when they bite it, because I like a little bit of stretch with that mono. So the only time that I don't, just out of necessity of getting the right action, is with those big topwaters on there. And if I do use braid, I'm usually using like 40-pound test on those topwaters. Now, sometime I will use on the little bitty Dog X Junior here. I told you I fished it on a spinning rod. I will use light braid on this. I'll use like 10-pound test braided line, simply because you can cast it so much farther with braid, and I'm usually working this thing pretty fast, and that 10-pound diameter braid is so small that I just don't think they can pick up on it like they can the 40 and 50-pound test. Okay, that's line. Let's get into the rods here. Guys, here is my workhorse for topwaters. This is the Megabass Levante Jerkbait Special. This is a 6'11" rod. It's a 4.5 power rod. It's got a nice, what I consider just a nice medium tip on it. And this, in my opinion, a 6'11" rod is perfect for walking most topwater lures out there. If you go to shorter than 6'11", I think sometimes you sacrifice your casting distance and long-term hook setting power. And if you go to over 6'11", like into 7 feet, it's a lot harder to work that bait with a longer rod. So this jerkbait special is I just absolutely love it for topwaters. Also, guys, this rod is at Tackle Warehouse. It is under $200. So I'll link it in the description too if you guys would like to try one of these out. But the main thing, let's talk a little bit about how to work it here. How you want to work your topwater. Now I'm talking on these topwaters here. Well, I guess it would apply to all of them, just depending on we'll talk about the situations to work it. But the main thing is with it is you've got two different things to consider as far as your cast. And a lot of it has to do with the type of cover that you're fishing. Sometimes you're fishing the topwater lures around shallower targets, like throwing it around docks or throwing it around the edge of a grass bed or something like that. And then sometimes you're winging it out there as far as you can, out on a big open point or open flat. So you got two different types of, type of things to consider there. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about fishing it around targets. One of the things about fishing a walking topwater around targets, just cast it out there and make sure you cast it well past your target, because you want to give yourself plenty of time to get the bait moving. Because a lot of times that walking topwater, sometimes it's hard to get the bait walking. So make sure you cast past your target well enough where you can get the bait walking. And just walk up to it with just like just twitching like that and reeling at the same time. Now, the amount that you want to twitch is based upon how much side-to-side action that you want to get out of it. If the fish are really aggressive, you may want to do a little bit more harder jerks like that to get that side-to-side dart. And if they're not as aggressive, like using the Diamante, you may want shorter jerks like that, shorter and faster, to get it going like that. So either down like that for wide side-to-side, or just like that for tighter wobble. Now, here's one of the things that you want to learn how to master. It's called walking a spook or walking a topwater around an object. Now, when you are just jerking it like that, you're jerking it down consistency like that at the same time. And that's what causes it to go back and forth. But you can do a half turn. So you can say you can be jerking it towards it. Say there's a stump you're trying to work it past there. You're jerking it like that. You can actually make this topwater lure walk around your spook. You can actually get it, instead of going like that, where it'll go like that, and start walking around it. And the way that you do that is you throw it out there, and as you're walking it like that, let it stop, and then just jerk it one time, and then let it, straighten up a little bit. Jerk it again like that. Maybe reel a couple times to straighten the nose. Jerk it like that. And you can actually get these by practicing they can walk around an object like that. They can go to one side. And you do that by doing a half turn instead of just like that. It's just something that requires a little bit of practice with that. But most of the time in that situation, just the consistent side-to-side jerk like that is going to be good. Now, the next thing you have to consider is how fast you want to work or how slow you want to work the walking topwater. Now, sometimes I'll throw it out there and I'll work it a couple times, like I'll jerk, 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 and then I'll stop it, and let all the ripples dissipate. Then I'll jerk it a couple times like that and stop it. Usually I'm doing this when I'm trying to keep the bait close to around a piece of object. Say I'm trying to keep it tied into a grass bed, or I'm trying to keep it around a lay down log or the edge of the dock as long as I can. That's when I'll just twitch it a couple times and let it stop. If I'm trying to cover water with it, like I'm trying to cover a big smallmouth flat, that's when I'm making the longest cast that I can possibly can. This is a really good tip that I learned from one of the old Ozark legends named Shorty Evans, is cast out there as far as you can in that clear water off that point, and as soon as it hits the water, just start reeling it as fast as you can like that. Don't even try to jerk it, just jerk your rod forward like that. And that's causing this thing will just be jumping all over the water, and it'll jump out of the water. And after you do that, about maybe 10 or 15 feet, just kill it in the water. And don't even move it. Just let it stop, let the ripples dissipate. And if there's any fish out there that you pulled up out of that flat or off that deeper point, they're gonna come and investigate that, and you can just twitch it a couple times after that, and a lot of times they'll hammer it. But most of the time, if I'm fishing open water, clear water situations, the speed of retrieve that I use on my cadence has to do with the water temperature, and it also has to do with the, how much surface disturbance is on the water from the wind. In general, here's a general rule of thumb. If you're fishing where the water temperatures are, say, like between 55 and 70 degrees, which is on a little bit cooler side, just use a little bit slower retrieve, just sort of a moderate, just like that. And if you're fishing where the water is quite a bit warmer, like approaching 75, 80, 85 degrees, that's when you want to speed it up and get that bait moving really fast. That'll really trigger a lot more strikes, especially if you don't have a lot of wind. Another sort of foundational piece of advice on there is the lighter the wind that you have, the faster you need to work the topwater, and the heavier the wind, the slower you have to work the topwater as far as to give them a chance to see it, if it correlates with the right water clarity. Because the calmer, the clearer the water is, the faster you need to work. The calmer, the clearer, and the warmer the water is, the faster you need to work it. And the more off-colored or windy or cooler the water is, you need to slow it down. So you're gonna have to determine the mood and the personality of the fish as far as the pace and the cadence from experimentation. Now, one thing that you will find is largemouth bass in general prefer a little bit slower presentation. The smallmouth bass and the spotted bass, a lot of times you can speed the bait up. It just seems they like a little bit faster presentation, but most of the time, if you have a largemouth heavy lake, they like a little bit slower presentation on that. Now, that is the one I use for most all the topwaters, with the exception on these big honking things or the little bitty one. If I'm using the big topwaters, like the Megabass Megadog X or the Megadog like this, they are so heavy that the rod that I just showed you is not going to work. That is when I go to my flipping stick. I go to the Megabass Alkalies flipping stick, 6-foot 11-inch rod, heavy action rod, and this bait here, this Megadog, guys, it weighs 6 ounces. This thing's freaking heavy. So you got to have the flipping stick in order to chunk that thing out there, and it is going to wear you out more. I mean, this is sort of like fishing a big glide bait. You can still work the flipping stick. It's going to be harder because it's heavier, but you've got to have the power to cast that thing on both the Megadog X and the Megadog with the Megabass Alkalies flipping stick. You got to have at least a 7.5-foot heavy action rod to do that. And it's the same, and the same applies to that as far as the conditions. But one thing that I will tell you about the big giant topwaters like this is you need to work them a little bit faster than what you would the normal walking topwaters, because they're so big. You don't want to have these fish to get a chance to look at it. You're not going to catch any fish on this thing, work it slow, then stopping it. They're not going to hit this sucker sitting dead in the water. So keep these things moving pretty fast. Don't let them get a good look at it. Anytime you're fishing the bigger one, fish it faster. And that's a pretty good general rule of thumb as far as, if you're fishing a little one versus a larger one. in general, most of the time, fish the smaller ones slow and the bigger ones a little bit faster, and that's gonna help out. And finally, guys, the little bitty finesse ones here, like the Megabass Dog X Juniors, that is when I fish it on the spinning rod, the Megabass Whip Snake that I use. Again, 10-pound test, straight braided line, tied right to the lure, and I can cast it out there a mile and really work it fast. So anyway, guys, that's a pretty good overview of all that. We're gonna take a little break, and then we're gonna get back to the final segment of the seminar, talking about where you wanna fish these things out, type of structures, and everything that you need to look for about where to toss them at. So we'll be right back. Okay, guys, now we're gonna finish up by talking about where you wanna throw it based upon seasonal, considerations, different times of year, different type of conditions. So what I wanna do is I'm gonna go through the 4 seasons of the year, and I'm gonna sort of explain to you what I look for based upon the time of the year and the water temperatures, which are really critical. First of all, just forget about the winter time. It's like, yeah, you might be able to catch a fish on one once in a while, but for the most part, don't even waste your time on it. This is going to be a technique that's going to work for you sort of between like April and November, in that time frame there. So let's divide it up into the springtime of the year and the summer and the fall as far as what you need to look for. So first of all, I don't really start throwing these things until the water temperature starts to get in the mid to upper 50s. That is really the first time I start throwing them. And I don't throw them much, really, guys, until after the spawn. Now, you can catch a few fish on it, like, when that water temperature is cooler in the springtime of the year. They will bite it, anytime, any place that you can catch them on a spinnerbait or buzzbait, you might catch one. But I really don't. In my own personal preference, I don't throw them until after I think that most of the fish are done spawning. And that's when some of the best topwater fishing is going to be for your walking topwater. Now, the first place that I look for after those fish spawn is I go out there on any type of secondary point close to where I think the fish have been spawning. So let's say, for example, I'm back in a major creek arm, and there's a nice spawning cove back in one of the coves off the major creek arms. And then there's a secondary point leading into that cove. That secondary point is going to be a really good spot to catch post-spawn fish on a walking topwater. And how I fish it and the depth that I fish it is completely related to the water clarity and the species of fish I have in the lake. If the water clarity is like less than 3 foot in clarity, most of the time I'm targeting the bank. I'm actually throwing the walking topwater to the bank, fishing, right around the point or down the side 100 yards or something like that. But if you've got less than 3 foot of visibility, those fish are going to be, right on the bank. And most of the time you're going to catch those fish either early in the morning, late in the evening, or on low light days. Now, and that's especially if it's a largemouth heavy lake. Now, if the water is clean, say the water visibility is over 4 foot, you've got a clear water lake, that opens up a lot more opportunities. You can still catch them shallow early and late in the day or on low light conditions, but you can also, and this is one of my favorite ways to fish it during the post spawn, is you can get out off of those points and fan cast out in anywhere between 20 to 30 foot of water and catch a bunch of them doing that. A lot of times those fish will pull out deep on those points after they spawn. And if the water's clear, you might be able to pull them up out of 15 or 20 foot of water, especially if the wind's not blowing very much. So this is really good also if you have a lake that's got a lot of spotted bass in it. All you guys out there that, fish the spotted bass lakes down at Lake Lanier, Georgia, or in Tennessee or in the Ozarks, just try getting out there on some of those flatter main lake points like in May in 30, 40, 50 foot of water and just chunk that walking topwater out there. It's a good way to catch big spotted bass under those situations. Now, this is going to hold up until you start getting into the summer months. Now, once you get into the summer months, your walking topwaters are going to get a little bit tougher to catch fish on. You can still catch them on it, but they're going to get a little bit tougher and they're going to become more situational. In the summertime, from about, maybe the second week of June up until maybe like the second week of September, shade is everything for a walking topwater. You've got to have shade where you're fishing at, or you're simply not going to catch much air. Other times of the year, you don't have to have shade quite as much. You could have days that have overcast or rain, which is always better. But you're going to have to take advantage of that shade where you find it. The shade can be from, the sun being low angle early and late in the day. It can be from overhanging trees. It can be from steep banks putting shade into the water. But that's going to be the key thing. So it's sort of the same deal. You want to start shallow early and late in the day, run that bank with it. And then you're not going to catch many in the summertime fishing it deeper like you were in the spring out there. If you're going to catch any walking topwater fish, you're going to have to stay shallow all day long, because you can catch a few of them under those low light conditions, just those fish that have been up feeding at night and are still roaming around up there early in the morning. But another favorite way I like to catch them in the summertime is I chase the spawning bluegills. So you can take a walking topwater and you can go back into those same coves that you caught where the bass spawned out in April, and the bluegill and the perch and the sunfish are going to be spawning back in those same coves all summer long. So you can take a walking topwater and you can fish the back of those coves in the summertime, and a lot of times you can catch good ones doing that. It doesn't work everywhere, but it works in a lot of different places. Anywhere you have spawn and perch is going to be good with that. Overall, summer is probably my least favorite time to fish it, other than obviously winter when they just don't bite it very good. But moving into the fall time of the year, it starts to pick up again. Now, for whatever reason, fall is probably my favorite time to fish a walking topwater. I've caught more fish in the fall on a walking topwater than any other time by far. There is that window in May that it works good, but I like it when it starts getting into the October and November. It's like something about the mood and the personality of the fish starts to change, and they just want to eat topwaters. They're trying to feed up for winter. They get more aggressive on it, and it just works really good. And it's all about covering water in shallow water. I don't care if you're fishing a rocky lake or a lake that's got grass in it, whatever it may be. It's basically putting that thing in your hand and covering water, and especially covering any shallow targets. This is the time of year that I fish it sort of like the same places I'd fish a spinnerbait or a chatterbait or something like that. I'll go down a bank, and if there's a shallow grass line, I'll try to fish that walking topwater right next to that shallow grass line. I'll try to take it and I'll pitch it up underneath boat docks to try to get into that shade of the piers. I'll throw it all around a lay down tree in the water. I'll throw it over some shade from overhanging trees. I'll throw it around an isolated stump. I'll throw it down the side of a deep commercial boat dock. In the fall time of the year, it's all about shallow targets. And so casting accuracy is critical, all that type of stuff. And it's about making the shorter casts. One of my favorite ways to fish a walking topwater in the fall time of the year is I flip it and pitch it just like I would a jig. Say, for example, there's a lay down tree in the water, and maybe there's a little opening that's maybe, 3 or 4 foot long within that lay down tree. I'll take that spook or something and I'll pitch it right in that opening, and I'll just twitch it 3 or 4 times like that. And a lot of times those big ones will come out of there and get that, in that type of situation. But anyway, guys, every single lake is unique to its own, because when you're talking about a walking topwater, it's so specific to the lake that you're fishing. And the things that determine that variable are the species of the lake that you have: smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass, the water clarity, the lake composition, the bait fish, all that type of stuff plays a role in it with it. And again, smallmouth is a completely different factor. I didn't talk a lot about smallmouth in this seminar simply because the number of anglers that watch this channel that just target specific smallmouth are pretty small. But walking topwaters, guys, from June until September, walking topwater and a jerkbait are the 2 best smallmouth lures, unless you're out there weenie worming with a live scope for them. If you're just fishing shallow, you can't beat the walking topwaters on that. Another thing, couple of different things that come to mind before we wrap it up here is one of the things that's really important as far as catching these fish on a walking topwater is when the fish bite, you have to know how to react to that. Now, the biggest mistake that most people make when they get a bite on a walking topwater is they're like a live nerve ending, and they set the hook as soon as they see a fish blow up on it. And that's the worst thing you're going to do, guys. You're going to lose so many fish doing that. And that usually happens because you're not prepared or you're not expecting to get a strike. One of the things that's really, really important, you got to listen to me on this, it's really important for walking topwaters, is you have to be involved with every cast. And every single cast, every time that you twitch that bait, expect that fish to blow up on it, and you'll be ready. And what I mean by being ready with it is, when, say you're jerking that bait like that and one blows up on it, don't do anything. Just keep working the bait like you were working it until you feel weight. And once you feel that weight, that's when you set the hook. Don't ever set the hook upon the strike, because if you're working it like that and all of a sudden you see a bite, and then out of instinct you set that hook as soon as that water blows up, guys, 90% of the time you're either going to miss that fish or you're going to lose that fish. It's going to jump off as you're fighting it. Get conditioned to the fact that, almost like close your eyes, you're working that thing, just keep working it like nothing even happened. And once you feel it load up, just rear back on it. That's probably the easiest thing to do, it's the easiest thing to say and the hardest to do. I even get fooled by it myself. If I'm fishing a topwater and I haven't had a bite for a while, I'll do the same thing. I'll jerk it out of their mouth until I remind myself just to fish through it with that. But anyway, guys, it's super fun to fish, man. It's like there's very few lure categories out there that are as fun. Great way to catch quality fish. It's just you can't beat it, man, when they're biting it. So anyway, guys, I hope it helps out. Shoot me some comments in this video if there's any other questions I can answer for you guys in the video to help you out. And again, appreciate everybody watching, using that Tackle Warehouse link if you want to buy some. And we'll see you guys next week.